Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Secretary Cooper. The administration has repeatedly asserted that issuing these licenses is essential to deal with an emergency. In fact, you said earlier in our hearing it was a policy decision by the Secretary of State based on an emergency so urgent that you can't even wait for a 30-day congressional review. In fact, Secretary's determination on May 24th is based on exactly that finding. That was the determination, I would just remind you again, that came 3 days after a classified briefing for the entire House with the Secretary of State where, while it was clearly under consideration, he didn't take the time to even mention it to the Congress. But you've clearly made an assessment that the weapons and ordnance in these licenses are available for delivery very soon, right, if it's an emergency?
Yes, the ones that were direct commercial sales, was already...
No. Let me just, but that's a if it's an emergency to deliver these, you've considered when they can be delivered, right?
So that is part of the calculus.
Right. So you've got to have specific information about when each of these items in these licenses will be available for delivery to the Saudis and Emiratis, right?
Again, part of the calculus.
I'm just asking if you've done that. You've done that for each of these, right?
Yes. So from not just the Department of State side, from the interagency side, regardless if there's an emergency status, it's incumbent upon us.
I understand.
It's a timing issue, sir.
Secretary, no, all right, I get it. I've sat through this whole hearing.
Okay.
It is a timing issue. And it's such an emergency that you couldn't wait 30 days. So what I'm trying to figure out is, and what I'd ask you is, if you could provide the information to the committee here, which we've not had an opportunity to hear from you on, when each of these items is going to be ready for delivery.
I can't say on specificity on each one. What I can say is if it's a DCS sale, a direct commercial sale, if it's already off the shelf, it's going. It's moving now. What wouldn't be moving is if it's in a manufacturing line.
I get it. I understand.
Okay.
We all understand that. That's what I'm asking you. I don't need you to tell me. No, let me just finish. I don't need you to tell me if it's manufactured, it's going to come later. I want to know if this is an emergency, what's the timeline? How long will it take? I'll get to the other ones. I'll get to the commercially made ones. How long will it take to manufacture these to produce them for delivery?
To your question,
yeah.
Per case, not all cases.
Yeah.
Per case, it is conditions-based. Part of it is contractually based. So we can talk based on it's either going to be a few months or longer, which is contributed to the emergency calculus.
I got you. So it's a few months. It's a few months or longer for all but the commercial, which I'll get to.
That's correct.
A few months or longer. So it's such an emergency. A few months or longer for every single one of the other items, but there wasn't 30 days for Congress to review. You understand why that's so difficult for this institution to understand, right?
The review never stopped, Congressman. The review is currently happening at the time.
There was no form. Come on, Assistant Secretary, please don't. You said earlier that the review is ongoing because we know about this. There was no formal 30-day notice, correct?
The informal notification.
There was no formal 30-day notice given.
Congress was in communication with us.
Was there a formal 30-day notice given?
The formal
yes or no? Can you direct him to answer that, Mr. Chairman?
It's a pretty simple yes.
Yes, there was formal notification in the form of an emergency declaration by the Secretary of State.
That is not what I'm asking you, and that's the problem that we have with the way this whole thing has been handled. Let me move on, and you understand that, Assistant Secretary, and I don't appreciate the attempt to try to be clever and simply refuse to answer the question, which is no. Pursuant to law, you've not granted that 30-day notice. You've gone forward with this emergency on a list of items that none of which will be available for at least months, except for the ones I'm going to talk about now. And you couldn't find time to give us the 30-day notice. Let me talk about the commercial ones. Over $2 billion of precision-guided munitions are available now. Is it typical for those to be manufactured before approval is given by Congress?
There are going to be items that are going to be on the shelf ready for any partner at any time.
I want to make sure I understand that. So one company manufactured over $2 billion of precision-guided munitions just to have on the shelf in case it was decided that perhaps they'd be available. Someone might have interest in purchasing them. Is that what you're telling us?
There are other weapons
that-
systems that are
But is
readily
that,
available.
I understand, but with respect
If
to these
if it's
PGMs,
if it's a earlier generation item, it's going to be existing in
I
stock.
want to know about these $2 billion in PGMs that are scheduled to be delivered to the Saudis and the Emiratis by one company. Were these, you're telling me that that company built these hoping one day to have a buyer, that it wasn't part of a longer plan, that it wasn't part of a discussion that the president had when he was in Saudi Arabia 2 years ago, that none of that happened. They just built them and, oh, here we come, perhaps we'll have a chance to sell them.
I would offer that Saudi Arabia is not the only partner that we work with in security cooperation, security assistance. So that particular item, PGMs, wouldn't be limited to just Saudi Arabia.
I understand.
have to be ruthless on time because we have 8 minutes, 7 minutes to vote, and we still have Mr. Allred. And
We do.
I apologize.
I don't think it's too much to ask whether the assistant secretary is telling us that $2.5 billion, over $2 billion of precision-guided munitions manufactured to be sold to the Saudis and Emiratis weren't actually manufactured for that purpose, and it's a coincidence that they're available now pending this emergency declaration.
I would say that the non-answer does answer the question.